I went to bed wishing I didn't wake up. I began digging out of the hole of despair to the point where, now I wake up every morning excited about things, whereas I went to bed wishing I didn't wake up.
And welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Humanity 2.0 podcast, where we are talking real talk with real humans. Today's guest is Jonathon Aslay. Jonathon is a midlife self-love relationship coach, which we're going to hear more about later in the episode. But first, Jonathon, I want to get comfy with you and I want to get to know you because, interviews can be so rigid. So my first question to you is, what are you notoriously bad at?
Say that I'm bad at travel, particularly international travel when I'm going to another country, but even domestic travel, I can be bad at that. I'm neurotic.
When you say you're bad at it, do you mean like schedule wise, or you're not sure which way to go to be efficient?
It's mostly when I'm in a place that I'm uncomfortable, that is not familiar to me, I can start building up anxiety within myself, not that I'm doing it intentionally. I mean, it's happening on its own. And then I'm in a space of trying to control my environment. And then I can get even more and more agitated trying to make sense of things. It's kind of, and you know what? I want to be candid. I want to stop saying I'm bad at it. I want to actually just start saying that I'm good at it. But I just know that that's one thing that I'm kind of bad at, along with, technology at times, that sort of thing.
Yeah, if anything, you can say that your attention to detail becomes even more rampant. So you're the best guy to travel with, probably because you're thinking of things that no one else is thinking of.
I would say the people that travel with me would differ than you.
On the other side of the scale, what are you notoriously good at? Like sing off the rooftops, I'm the best at this. What are you good at?
I think I'm pretty good. And I don't want to say the best because there are so many people that are good at this. But compared to most people, I'm pretty comfortable doing public speaking, which tends to be one of the greatest fears for most people. I usually, even when I record my podcast, I put like 5 bullet points and I can riff for 1 hour.
Wow.
I think I'm pretty good at that. So, and other people would say that. And the irony is people think that I'm this overly gregarious person, but I'm more of an introvert, even though outwardly I look like I'm an extrovert.
Yeah, we're going to get you out of that shell. If there was a song that the world would consider cringy, but for you, it's like the cat's meow, what song is that?
Cringy.
Yeah.
Well, my favorite song is You Can't Get What You Want Till You Know What You Want by Joe Jackson. And I don't think that would be a cringy song, but I really do believe it embodies kind of one of the self-love principles within personal development, self-help, spiritual work, is to have clarity on what you want and from a healthy, sincere place, not from a place of, I believe, taking advantage of others and that sort of thing. So that's one of my favorite songs.
Do you want to sing a few bars?
Sure. Sometimes you start feeling so lost and lonely. Then you find it's bad. It's all in your mind.
I love it. I love it so much. Are you an iPhone guy or an Android guy?
My girlfriend would give me havoc for this. I'm a Droid. She's an iPhone.
That poor woman.
By the way, every relationship I've ever been in, my significant ones, they're all iPhones and I'm an Android.
Wow. I think that means you need to change over to the iPhone world. Just think about it. Just
I'm going to stick with it. That's one of the other things I'm bad at is technology. So,
but iPhones make it easier, though. Okay, we could go on all day.
Yeah, but when you have a PC, it's also, then you have to move everything over.
Yeah, that's true. What about your favorite quote in all the world? What's your favorite quote and by who?
This gets asked of me quite a bit. And, my favorite quote is so simple that it's not something poetic. It's not like a Rumi or, like Shakespeare or, Mark Twain or something like that. So my favorite quote is from Walt Disney. And I heard this 15 years ago when I was in a really dark place in my life. And I remember it in the movie Meet the Robinsons. And the simple quote is, keep moving forward. And for the last 15 years, this simple quote has helped me navigate some of the darkest points in my life, even if it's just one tiny step forward, is to operate from that vantage point. And it's made a big difference in my life. So just keep moving forward, kind of like just keep swimming, you know?
Yes, that's me. I'm so Dory. Yeah. Do you have an example of where that quote was effective for you?
You know, what comes to my mind is there was a moment in time about, let's see, this would have been 2010, where I was, not broke, but I mean, on the verge of being almost out of money. I had to move back in with my mother and father. After once living in a $2.2 million home, I moved into a retirement community, and all I had was 100 square foot space to live in. And I just set a mantra that, from my business, and I started doing dating and relationship coaching. I just made a simple mantra for myself: was my monthly income exceeds my monthly expenses. And the quote was an embodiment of this idea that I could bring in more than what I was spending. And I just kept saying it over and over as an affirmation, to the point where once I embodied it, and I remember this was November 2011. That was the last time I had to use savings to support myself for a very, very long period of time. Embracing the just keep moving forward.
That's a big change to go from being in your own space to sharing a space.
Yeah.
I don't know why I thought of Shady Pines. I had no idea. Switching over to humanity. Humanity is wonderful. When you think of the word humanity, what image or what story or feeling comes to mind for you?
Vanessa, this is so big in a way. I'm very curious about the history of human beings. I'm fascinated, going back to cave people days, through ancient times, Cleopatra, that sort of thing, Egypt, all the way to medieval times to now. And I think of humanity almost from a place of, God, what comes to mind? I mean, I'm actually processing this as the words are beginning to come out of my mouth, is how when we lived in small villages and tribes, and there was unison and unity and kind of one for all type of environments, it was a beautiful environment to live in. But those were pockets, and there were other pockets of tribes that were coming, wanted to control and manipulate and take advantage of, and that sort of thing. And I would love humanity to be one tribe where we're all pulling the boat together, kind of thing. That's what I wish for humanity. And when I think of humanity, I think of very fragmented groups, but not one collective whole.
Do you feel that we have the potential to get there and to get to that collective pool, or are we, just in a dark period right now?
I mean, I'm kind of wild in my thoughts. So, I believe in, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. I believe in aliens. I believe in a lot of things that would not be mainstream. I suspect humanity is going to go through, or there's going to be a big crash. And there's going to be another evolution of this human experience. And hopefully there's a remnants from the failures of this experience that will hopefully cultivate into maybe a new experience. That, one of my favorite movies is Avatar. And, and I look at how the Na'vi lived in unison with the environment and with each other, and a connection there. And whether that's our next evolution or not, that's what I wish for, I hope for. But it could be a dozen more evolutions of humanity. When you think of how vast, the Earth is something like 4 billion years old. I mean, we could have had multiple different civilizations, even more substantial than the civilization we have today. So who knows? But I think, like anything, we might have to be on the brink of disaster before there's a collective we that gets birthed.
Yeah. Well, there definitely has to be a catalyst of some sort to move forward. And I really like that you brought up the fact that there have been several civilizations before us. So yeah, that is a great thought to consider. We all have moments where a person or another soul reminds us of our shared humanness. Can you tell me about a person who surprised you with their level of empathy or compassion and how it changed how you viewed people?
You know, as you ask that question, not one individual comes to mind, but I want to say that 7 years ago, I lost my 19-year-old son to an accident. And it's interesting because when I shared it publicly on social media, I mean, it had thousands of messages and letters, and even from people that didn't like me, And there was a moment of humanity that was birthed from either sympathy or empathy. And it's in those moments where imagine if that's just our natural being, sympathy and empathy always, instead of a tragedy happening for that to materialize. And in the last 7 years, I mean, even consistently, I still get kind messages from people. It might just be a text message, it might be a meme sent to me or something, particularly centered around my son, by the way. So that is usually the catalyst. But it was amazing to witness a level of love. But again, it was birthed from tragedy. Wouldn't it be great if it doesn't have to be that to spread love?
I remember reading your biography and reading about your son Connor. That was the first thought I had. And that was the first thing I typed to you as well in the message was, I'm so, as a mother, I could not imagine losing my child. And I'm sure all parents can relate as well. So that kind of feeds into the next question that I had for you regarding loss and loved ones, and how loss and love are just part of the shared human experience. But within your loss with Connor, can you tell me how that experience impacted the rest of your life? And if you can share with everyone a little bit more about
Yeah.
him.
Sure. Yeah. And thank you again for reaching out, starting with love as your opening to me. And I do remember that. So it was interesting because as I reflect back, and we had his memorial service 10 days after he passed, 10 or 11, 12 days, somewhere like, I know it was less than 2 weeks. And I was given an opportunity to speak, at the service and give his eulogy. And what irritated me was the church only allowed me a few minutes. I wanted a half hour.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote and I went much longer than they would have technically allowed me. But I remember as I was getting to the end of my speech, if you will, my share, I looked at everybody and I said, look, to his friends, to his mother, his brother, cousins, and to school teachers and that showed up, and my friends and that sort of thing. I said, we have a choice. We can grieve with suffering, or we can grieve with love. And in that moment, I was like, okay, I'm going to choose to grieve with love. Now, be candid with you, Vanessa. I have no idea what was coming out of my mouth. I was just, I was just on an autopilot communicating. But at the time, what I think it meant to me was I knew that he would not want any one of us to suffer. And I said that to everyone. I said, look, he want us to live our lives balls to the wall, because that's who he was. He was James Dean, with his hair on fire. That's who he was. So that's what he'd want for us. And I said, we can choose not to suffer. We can celebrate his life. We can come and he'd want us to live our lives fully. And that would be an expression of love. And so weeks that went on past his, the weeks later, I was in a kind of a funk professionally. I was blogging about self-love at the time. I'd been blogging about it prior to him passing. And 2 months after he passed, I think I did a post on Facebook wanting to write a book about this. And I got a message from a Facebook follower, if you will. And she said, Jonathan, I've been following you a while. I'm a ghostwriter. If you'd like any help writing, I'd be more than happy to sit with you. And we sat down and I said, well, what are you going to charge me for this? And she said, this is a gift to you. But any work that I do, it's a gift to Connor. And I was floored, talk about humanity in this moment, because I could easily, and we eventually together went on to, write my book. Most of it's my words. She just cleaned it up and put it to music. She was my chat GPT, if you will. I did the bulk of it and she put music to it. Jennifer Matthews, and wanted to give her credit. And the book was worth 9 months later. And it allowed me to explore love from a way that hadn't really explored before. And ever since then, I've been fascinated with this experience we call love and self-love and loving others. And how can we come from a loving place? And what would love do? That's the name of my podcast, the What Would Love Do podcast. In other words, exploring things from the eyes of love. And I don't always have the answer, Vanessa. I mean, I'm still scratching the ant's belly in all of this, but that's what was birthed from that experience. And I'm very grateful, because I genuinely believe, from a humanity perspective, when we human beings really tap into our sovereignty. And really quickly, if anyone thinks the word self-love is a little bit off-putting, I just simply want to say self-love embodies self-worth, self-confidence, self-esteem, self-reliance, self-discipline. And it's also recognizing that for those of us who are adults, we all have an emotional 6-year-old inside of us that seeks the love that maybe we didn't get in childhood and that sort of thing. And so self-love is also embracing the emotional child in us that might be suffering and give it as much love, because we can love ourselves when we're hurting, when we're feeling fear, insecurities, doubts, negative patterns, limiting beliefs, judgments, that sort of thing. And so my hope is that my book has made a difference in many people's lives. My hope is just even talking on your podcast, if I could, one thing I say help someone go, oh, I'm going to do something differently and empower myself, then this is all part of humanity, is, I believe, paying it forward.
And your story is so moving. I really think that 1+ persons will most definitely feel, that authenticity and that desire to want to love themselves. They may just finish the episode and go on that self-love journey with you. After you finish that book, how do you think Connor felt?
Well, there's the personality Connor, and then there's the spirit of Connor. And, what I know. So I know how he'd feel. He'd be very proud of me. One of the things, it makes me cry now. One of the things he said to me about 2 weeks before he passed, we had a habit of having lunch either once or twice a week. His mother and I were divorced, so it was part of one of my rituals to have lunch with him. I mean, he was 19 when he passed, but even that last year of his life, we'd get together almost twice a week. And 2 weeks before, he said to me, he goes, I am so grateful. He didn't, these aren't his words. I'm going to make it a little more poetic, but he said, I'm so grateful to have a dad who can get together with me whenever I want or whenever he wants. In other words, I have flexibility in my lifestyle. And he was expressing gratitude. And more importantly, he said, and his brother said this to me too on a different time. He said, I remember, Dad, when you were at rock bottom and you built yourself up from scratch. I shared earlier, I used to live in a $2.2 million home, and I eventually moved in with my mom and dad in a retirement community. And I had no job, no nothing, age 40, and I had to start over. And I built up to the point by the time he passed away, I had been recognized as a prominent dating and relationship coach. I had a YouTube channel. On his birthday 3 years ago, my YouTube channel reached 100,000 subscribers on his birthday.
Wow.
Yeah. And then subsequently, a year later, it got up to 200,000, or 2 years later, I should say. So I think he'd be radically jazzed. Like he'd be going, damn, I've got a boomer dad who has a YouTube channel with so many, like for a millennial, app, if you will, his boomer dad does better than most millennials.
That's too funny. I think he would totally be proud and
Yeah.
cheering and dancing with you for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
most definitely. They say that hardship teaches empathy, and once you've been broken, you see the world differently.
Yeah.
In your brokenness throughout your life, do you feel that that changed your life journey and how you viewed the world around you?
Yeah. So as I look back on my life, and I was born, as I said, a tail end baby boomer. 1985, one of my favorite movies was the movie Wall Street with Charlie Sheen and Michael Douglas. And one of the lines in the movie is greed is good. And I adopted a very greed is good way of living, seeking superficial things, seeking the nice car, the nice clothes, the nice watch. And I lived a very superficial, driven life. And even in my marriage, I was a very unconscious husband. I'm not proud of that, but I'm aware that I didn't know who I was at age 29 years old when I got married. I was still, interestingly enough, I was so unaware of who I was as a person. And at the time, my now ex-wife and I were going through a divorce. I lost my high-end corporate job. I was going through divorce, and then the market crash of 2028. I got wiped out financially. Hence why I went from a home to my mom and dad. And I was at the lowest point of my life. My identity was pummeled.
Mm-hmm.
That for a long period of time, I went to bed wishing I didn't wake up. Drugs and alcohol were prevalent in my life, and online dating was actually a form of self-medication. Now, it coincidentally turned into a vocation for me because I could help women. I began helping women identify broken men like myself through my escapades. So good luck, bad luck, I don't know. The crash, was that a bad thing or a good thing? But once I adopted a personal development, self-help, spiritual practice, and even therapy, I began digging out of the hole of despair to the point where now I wake up every morning excited about things, whereas I went to bed wishing I didn't wake up for a long period of time.
I'm so grateful that that experience led you to where you are now, and with this perspective on helping people.
Yeah.
It's almost as though those escapades were research.
Well, there's no doubt,
It was
In
research.
fact, discomfort is a sign that something new, is to be birthed within us. And at the time, the discomfort was not fun, and even, and I go through these, not just periods of time, but I go through even daily evolutions of using the tools that I've learned in my life to regulate my emotions, to adopt more of a spiritual way of being. And I believe I'm just a kinder, nicer, more aware person. And it feels good to actually operate from a place of loving myself and loving others. And when I say the and, it's an equal sign. Loving myself and loving others. It's equal to it, the desire to be in that energy. And again, imagine if we all could adopt a loving others energy along with loving ourselves, because it's like the oxygen mask. And I write about this in my book. If you're, when you're on an airplane and the flight attendant says, in the case of cabin pressure, if you're traveling with small children, put the mask on yourself first. Well, if we're not loving on ourselves and filling our own oxygen mask, then it's going to be difficult you can love others at your own expense, of course. And so that's the message. My intent, my passion is to encourage individuals to seek help. There is nothing, weak about seeking help. There's nothing weak about, asking for help. But more importantly, The idea of the ask is to seek, how can I grow as an individual? How can I evolve as an individual? How can I love myself? How can I be more loving? Start with the question and start seeing what pops up for you. And so if you came across this podcast, great, because Vanessa's doing some really great work out there wanting to, encourage humanity, in a whole to be. And I suspect one of your mission statements, is that place of loving yourself and everyone else from a humanity perspective. And it can start by just reading a book. It could be starting by watching an Instagram reel. It could start by finding a therapist in your area and talk about the shitty childhood you had or the awesome childhood you had, and dig into who and what makes up who you are, and be curious about the question of who am I, why am I here, and what's it all for? I think those are great questions to ask oneself, and to be inquisitive. My girlfriend says, people who don't ask questions lack imagination, lack curiosity, but more important, lack most likely imagination. And so ask questions. And stop watching the news, because that'll just feed the wrong wolf. But that's another story.
So true. That's what I tell my husband all the time, all the time. And so he goes into, I guess, like these like Minecraft-esque adult like games where you can, meet other adults and travel these worlds as communities. And that's great. The news can definitely change your perspective and make you more negative and more susceptible to just negativity in general.
Listening to information that divides, saying and coming from a place of I'm right and they're wrong, I believe we're already starting on the wrong footing. And that's my own personal belief system. Nobody else has to agree with it. But I do believe when we come from a place of how can humanity benefit without, come from a place of how can we both benefit? I think those are just better questions.
For sure. Today's society often judges what we don't understand. And in your story with self-love and also your grief journey, those were so impactful for me personally, reading about those. Can you take a moment and enrich your fellow humans by telling us how we can be there for someone else that's grieving? And then also how can we be there for ourselves?
Yeah. So it's interesting because, one of the things that kind of rubbed me the wrong way when my son passed and was when people said, I'm sorry. And when I say it rubbed me the wrong way, and I'm saying it with a little bit of a smile on my, my cheeks, but my mouth is, well, you didn't do anything wrong. Like the I'm sorry, I feel like, I stepped on your toe. I'm sorry, and I recognize that what they're saying is I'm sorry for you or I'm sorrowful for you. And I had a dear friend of mine, this was about 2 or 3 months after he passed away. We got together with a group of people and he said to me, maybe it was 6 or 8 months later. It was quite a bit of time later now that I think about it. And he goes, not a day goes by that I don't think about you and your son and everything. And he goes, you're in my thoughts, you're in my prayers. And can I just give you a hug? And I thought, God, there was something about you're in my thoughts, you're in my prayers that didn't feel like taking responsibility for anything. It came from, like, in other words, the sorry piece, it was more about a giving than just the acknowledgement of the pain. And so I look at anytime I see something on social media or I connect with someone and they're going through a hardship. Coincidentally, the best man in my wedding also lost his youngest son to an accident. So we both had 2 boys. He also lost his son. And, my first words were, you're in my prayers. Can I give you a hug? And that felt more empowering. It felt like there was an action involved, and this is my judgment. I mean, please forgive me. It's my projection. It's my judgment. I'm not here to say I'm right or wrong. This was just the way I observed it. And it feels more empowering to me today. And so whenever I see somebody struggling, I always send light. I always say, I send a message. I'm sending you light, love, healing, juju, instead of, when I say taking ownership, I'm sorry. Well, you didn't do anything. You don't need to do anything, but you can give from a different place, but you don't have to take ownership. That's just my personal thing, Vanessa. Mm-hmm. As far as your question about self-love, so I'm going to throw a radical idea. I've recognized we humans oftentimes walk around unconscious to ourselves. Now, here's the thing. Our ego is so great at telling us we are supreme beings, that we can gaslight ourselves. I'll use the term gaslighting in a way that wasn't intended, but we can convince ourselves. Our ego can do a fantastic job of not taking ownership of our actions, not taking ownership of our fears, our insecurities, our negative patterns, our limiting beliefs, our judgments towards others, how our actions can affect other human beings. We can do a very disillusional gaslighting job there. And to me, self-love is the recognizing that, and I'm going to use an analogy, that we are the actor on stage of a play. Our ego's the director telling us what to do. The other actors are just mirrors of what's going on in our lives. But the real trick is to be the audience member. And you are also the audience member watching. And if you could watch yourself, really step outside and watch your actions and go from a heart-centered place, like, right? You have to be outside of this experience. You have to be almost like neutral. What would the average person say about your actions? And when you can master looking at yourself from that vantage point of the audience member, I believe that's one of the most loving things you can do for oneself, is to adopt that level of self-awareness. Now, this takes ninja level skills. I'm going to tell you, to get to this place, this is not easy. You got to want to get there. Now, here's the thing. Again, everybody thinks, a lot of people are just clueless to the audience member. But if you can really take a step back and watch yourself, again, I think it's one of the most loving things you can do, because you most likely will operate from a less self-centric place of just self. And you open up to, because I do believe self-love is also loving others. That is a key piece of this.
And is that what you also go over in your book?
Not as deeply as I did just now. My book needs a 2.0. It's funny, when you write a book, as soon as it's published, here's a copy of my book. As soon as it's published and everything's done, you're like,
wait,
oh my
more.
God, now there's so many things I forgot to say and put in here. And certainly it needs a 2.0. I am writing another book, but and my book is very simplistic, by the way, for everyone listening. I'm going to give it's a second grade edition. It's for second graders. It's not for, if you're a journey person, that you've been on this journey, you've been at this for a while, it will be a nice little tiny refresher, but it's not as deep as books like The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, or The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer, or Return to Love by Marianne Williamson, just to name a few. I list all my favorite books in the back of the recommended reading section. Again, I think I'm for the beginner, just to crack them open. That's my intent.
Two things. Self-Love 2.0 is your title. You're welcome. And then the other, not to cut off what you were saying, it was so beautiful about watching yourself from the audience. I think that's so wonderful to hear. We are so often just focused on being that actor and thinking about nothing but ourselves. So having that audience perspective and really seeing yourself, that means something. It really does. I know that that's not even scratching the surface of what you're saying, but that's just what came to me when you were speaking about that and visualizing the stage and from the audience perspective. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, there's also, it's interesting because I'm in love. Okay. And I want to say I'm in love from a very healthy, grounded, secure way. And I mean, it's like I wish everyone could actually feel this way. And the way I operate in our relationship is I'm constantly looking at ways to make her life better. Like I'm just thinking of things like, I mean, I'll just give you something cheesy that just happened yesterday. But when she's at my place, I have a shower caddy and all of her toiletries and stuff is in the bottom caddy. And I've got the top three caddies, and I'm like, I don't even use like half of this stuff. So I went and rearranged it all and put hers on the second shelf. And I'm taller than her. So putting it on the highest shelf, it would be taller than her because it's at my eye level. And I did that, kind of not even thinking about it. Like it was just a natural reaction to go, oh, I want to do something that most likely would bring her joy. And it didn't need boasting or anything like that. But it was the awareness to go, I want to do something in this very moment I'm in a shower, mind you. Okay. And I'm thinking about this. I mean,
That's
of
where
the
all the
100
best
other
thoughts
things.
happen.
Yeah. But, I'm singing, I'm doing all my other stuff. I'm thinking about humanity sometimes, but it was like I stopped. And to be present is probably one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves, to stop in that noise of the past, stop the noise of focusing on the future, to be present right now, to see. She has to lean down. That must be hard. Like in that moment, just to see that. And that takes a level of presence that we oftentimes are not good at, because we spend a lot of time in fear of the past, or pain of the past, or fear of the future. And the present is such a beautiful moment. Another book that many people tout, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, would be a reflection of what I just shared. And the embodiment of self-love is to be in a space of presence, of groundedness, of appreciation, of compassion, of empathy, all of these beautiful words, wrapped in, the heart of love.
Mm-hmm.
And it requires intentionality. I want to say this to everyone. You have to want to do this. Like, I think the ego is like, oh, I've got it. I do this already. I'm so giving to everybody else. Oftentimes giving to everyone else is an abdication of your own needs in many cases. And it comes across, by the way, I think there's an inner martyr that's going on when people give to everyone else outside of themselves. And I really sincerely believe that we have a lot of people that give, but they come from that martyr perspective. It's not always from a clean place. It's from a place of, I need validation. I need love from you. Because we humans here, at least in the United States, I can't speak for other parts of the world, but we are suckling on the nipple of the need for validation. I need you to love me so I can feel good about myself. And it's only gotten worse with social media.
Sure.
So anyways, I pontificated a bit. I'll shut up.
That's okay. That is quite all right. I love that your book is called What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? Is that right? Is that the title?
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So let us ask you, what the heck is self-love anyway?
I've been kind of saying it, all along. It represents self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence, self-reliance, self-discipline, all those juicy self-words, nurturing that little 6-year-old inside of us, the emotional 6-year-old inside of us. A lot of people think of self-love in the area of self-care,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Self-care is great for the physical being, but to really embody self-love is to say, and I don't think I've ever said it this way before, is to say that, and I'm thinking about this in the context of your podcast about humanity. I really believe that it's the embodiment of the sovereign being that we all are in relationship to all the other sovereign beings. Like you and I are right now connected to one another. And it's in that space of taking the oxygen mask for yourself first, fill your love cup. But it's also the embodiment of, how can I fill someone else's love cup? To ask the question, to be curious about another human being and all human beings from a place of curiosity, from a place of empowerment, from a place of divine action, coming from a grounded, calm, compassionate, empathetic place. And you have to, as I said earlier, you have to want to do this. You have to want to do it. Like, I'm going to take it even a step further. You have to want to do it. And mindfulness is the practice of loving oneself and everyone else. That's what mindfulness is, coming from a place of, how can I come from a place of love? Like, ask those questions instead of, sadly, what can I get? Mm-hmm. And we are a society that's hyper-focused on what can I get versus what can I give. And let me say this to those that are in romantic relationships. The reason why I said I'm in love, and I know if she was sitting here next to me, she would sing the praises of our relationship. And it's the embodiment of the strong desire to always be giving. Like, we just want to give to each other. And like it's kind of funny because we can go out to dinner and she goes, it's my turn to treat. I go, no, it's my turn to treat, because we like to treat one another when we're out. We're not caught up in the masculine, feminine dynamic that it's supposed to be. It's like we come at it from a place of, what can I give this time? But it's also the embodiment and the capacity to receive what is being given. And this is where a lot of people are genuinely hurting in the capacity to receive. And I believe it's a function of childhood wounds and adult traumas where their fears, their insecurities, or God forbid, their fantasy of relationships, outweigh their coming from a very healthy place of wanting to give and the capacity to receive.
Where can people find your book, your work? How can they find you on the social platforms?
Well, thank you for allowing me to share that. So if you're watching the video or you're looking at the podcast, my name is listed there. Just cut and paste that into Google. The first thing that will come up is my YouTube channel. The next thing that'll come up is my website. After that's my social media. On Amazon is my book. It's only there. Not for any other reason than they're just the biggest, over the world. And if you want to connect with me, you can just reach out to the website. It'll take you to my support page. Again, if anything that I said sparked any curiosity, I have both. I predominantly work with women in dating relationships, but I also have a channel now for men. I believe, and let me just say this to everyone. I'm not the expert teacher. I just tell you where to go to get help. I help create the foundation, and I say, go here, go here, go here, and go here.
You're like the traffic cop. Directing everyone to where they need to go. Well, on behalf of women, thank you. Thank you for what you do. Jonathon, you've shared some wonderful thoughts today, and you've shared some amazing information about self-love, about your work. Your journey is inspiring. I do want to close out with asking you one of my favorite questions of all time. And just do not think about anything you said the past hour or 45 minutes. But what is your message to humanity?
I'm just about to say to love yourself. What is my message?
If you could share a message, any message at all, what would that be?
Please forgive me because you're taking away my entire content.
Please take a moment. Please take a moment and think about it.
I'm sure there's a quote that I think it was maybe even John F. Kennedy that said, don't ask what your country can do for you. What can you do for your country? So in that same messaging, or similar to that messaging, and instead of asking, what can I get? Ask yourself every day, what can I give? What can I give? And you may not know the answer to it, but just ask, what can I give? How can I give? How can I just give from that pay it forward perspective? And I'm imagining if we all could do that every single day, pay it forward, what can I give? Humanity could quickly turn itself around, that we don't need another calamity, that we don't need several civilization calamities to really experience the nirvana of the embodiment of love.
That is an excellent message. Thanks again so much for being here. And for everyone else, thank you guys for joining us this episode. We'll see you next week for another episode of Humanity 2.0. Don't forget to be good to other humans.
Thank you, Vanessa.